So thank you for joining me today for a Gibson test webinar. And I'm just going to go through some different information. Everyone that attends the webinar will receive a free test to try. You can test yourself or you can test someone in your family. So let's go ahead and get started. I am recording this webinar, so if you have someone that you wanted to share this with, feel free to do that as well. We just make sure my audience view is good today. Looks good. I'm here in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which is the world headquarters for LearningRx, which is a one-on-one brain training company. We have about 80 locations around the US, and then we have about 90 additional locations outside of North America. We also have about 300 licensees here in the US outside of our centers. So just a little bit about LearningRx. We do work with one-on-one brain training. We celebrated last year 100,000 brains trained. Our training focuses on 7 core cognitive skills. These are the same skills, or a portion of these skills would be the same skills that would make up someone's IQ. And our training works with anyone from 4 to our oldest client actually was 95 years old. As I mentioned, we have about 70 locations around the US. And then in 2009, we started a license called BrainRx. And we started licensing people all over the world. And one of the big issues with doing brain training in other countries and with other languages was the lack of good cognitive testing or access to cognitive testing throughout the world. So we have this test that our licensees, professional licensees, had been using for several years, probably about 20 years. And we decided to take that test, renorm, revalidate the test, and then translate the test so that we could help measure our cognitive training and measure the intervention throughout the world. And so we've completed that. Last year, the Gibson test was peer-reviewed, and I'm going to go through that with you. But the reason that this test was developed and sort of taken to the next level was to help our licensees measure their intervention. So in our own research here on LearningRx, we've used over 30 different tests. One of the main tests would have been the Woodcock, and then other testing. But Gibson test is a test that's been available for anyone who wants to measure or screen a school, and so we'll go ahead and get into that. This is my family. Within my family, I have got 4 kids here and a husband. And within this small group of people, we've had ADHD, brain injury, reading problems, severe enough where I could have probably had them diagnosed with dyslexia at the time. And then last year, my oldest daughter, who's on the right, had a couple concussions. And of course, doing what we do, all my kids had been tested, but one of the other benefits of this test is it was a quick way for me to test my 15-year-old after several concussions and see where she was after her injury compared to before her injury, and see if her concussions had affected her cognitive skills. So this tool has been very helpful for my own family, and also just a history of where they are currently, and then later on where they need to go. I've also recently taken the test, so I turned 46 this year, and one of the weird things about aging is loss of some of the cognitive skills that we're used to. So probably the sharpest time in my life was when I was mid-20s. I did mainly just training with actual clients. I had a center, and at a time when I was training about 5 students, I was at my highest level of memory and attention and processing speed. So very clear thinking, really good memory. I could remember facts from, a couple weeks ago, like phone numbers and things like that you wouldn't normally remember. So at 46, after not training new people for, I don't know, maybe 10 years, I can feel that I'm not quite as sharp as I used to be. And so the cognitive test was really helpful for me to see where I was. Fortunately, my skills are still pretty strong. It's just that when you have, and you probably all know this, when you have very strong skills and you lose some of those skills, it affects you because you know that you could have done things before. So my whole family has used this test. So today I wanted to cover some different scenarios, why test, and then 4 different scenarios, different test results for people, so you can see sort of how the tests work. Then go over the Gibson test, the skills that are tested, as well as the report that we have. And then look at why testing multiple skills when you're trying to help someone or just see what's going on, why testing multiple skills is so important when you're looking at cognitive skills. And one of the questions the Gibson test wants to really answer is why, when you take 2 people and they're given the same task, so in this case 2 kids, after 15 minutes, one person is done and they're ready for their next thing, and after an hour, another kid in the same class, same instruction, same knowledge, is struggling. And that is what the Gibson test really sets out to help answer, along with reading skills, which I'll show you here. And the fact is that these kids come with different tools, and so that's what we want to test. So when we deal a lot with parents in our training centers, a lot of what the parent sees and what I've seen in my own children is, lack of confidence, maybe some friends they shouldn't be around. That's happened for me. Motivation, they just don't want to do it. Poor grades, maybe lack of wanting to be highly developed later on. So maybe they don't really want to go to college, or they're focused on doing things that I would wish they would refocus their attention. So those are the things that we see as parents or as people. And then you can see the causes. We believe that about 80% of the consequences that you see are due to poor cognitive skills, and therefore that is why we would want to test these skills, and then ultimately for us train these skills. So these are the different reasons that we would expect someone might want to take the test. And for me personally, it's just eliminate guesswork. So when my child is struggling in reading, instead of thinking, what's happening at school, what's the instruction, let's see if it has anything to do with their cognitive skills, or if they're impulsive or low motivation. Is this motivation or is this cognition? When you have this type of testing, it really helps eliminate choosing the wrong service or possibly the wrong treatment. So it's really just a savings of money, time, and effort. And we wouldn't want to offer cognitive testing to someone who is strong with testing but maybe had a behavior issue and needed to go somewhere else. And then for us, this is a great test to look at a measurement of how well the training works, or any type of intervention. So if you do use some type of intervention in your work, or you're considering using an intervention, this test comes with a final report. So you're able to automatically get a report on what changes occurred due to whatever intervention you were using. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at some different case studies, and these are their test results here. So this test comes with a learning skills rating scale. So this is 64 questions that if it's an adult or a parent can go through, the teacher could go through as well, and add their observation. So a test is only as good as the test taker at the time of the test, but when you start adding on observations that the parent or the teacher sees, and then you can see, it looks like in observation that this person has attention issues, and then you can go to the actual test result and see that they tested below average with attention cluster, then maybe you have a better test finding and you can come up with a better treatment plan for that client or student. And this student actually was 11, and the parent came in because of academic difficulties that the student was having, and the student had been previously diagnosed with autism. So you get an idea of that as well when you go through it. So here is parent observations of a 7-year-old, and you can see the parent feels like this child has auditory processing issues based on the observation, oppositional behavior, and then attention skills would be the top 3 observations or concerns. But then when you go to their actual results, their auditory processing skills are pretty high. So this is really helpful in understanding, oh, maybe this wasn't a cognitive issue. Maybe this has more to do with instruction or knowledge of reading. And then here's an adult male. This male had multiple concussions, I think maybe 5 or 6 concussions from playing a sport. And in his first semester of college, he had such difficulty that he actually had to drop out of college, even though he had an academic scholarship as well as an athletic scholarship. And here's his test results. And so in this particular case, you can see that these concussions really did affect his cognitive skills. He was later diagnosed with a brain injury. And so then we know how we could possibly help this student, based on what areas were affected. So I know a lot of times with brain injury, there's a focus mainly on just a few skills, but it's very important to test all major cognitive skills to really get a full idea of what type of training that student needs. So the Gibson test is based on, this is the learning model, but it's based on the CHC theory for learning, and that's the Carroll Horn Cattell model of intelligence, which almost all major IQ tests are based on. Of course, ours is just a little different. So, and this test is going to be based on the cognitive skills, but there also is a word attack test, and that's just because a lot of the clients that we work with tend to have reading difficulties, and we want to see if it's a cognitive issue or if it's a word attack issue. And that is important because you can see here, this is on over 2,000 clients that we had that were previously diagnosed with dyslexia. National Reading Panel came out in the early 90s with a lot of information on how to help someone that had reading difficulties. The main focus was a skill called auditory processing, or within that, phonemic awareness skill. They say that 88% of those with dyslexia have this auditory processing deficiency. And so what began was a lot of focus on that one skill. The problem is this is just on 2,000, but you can see here there's this cluster of weak cognitive skills, and it makes a lot of sense because for reading difficulties, it's a sound-based language, so of course you need the auditory processing, but it's also we have a very difficult language based on all the different languages that have been influenced or have influenced the English language, all the different spellings, and that requires a lot of long-term memory. So if you have difficulty in auditory processing and long-term memory, that should really be a different approach, and a different treatment for that individual. So if you just focused on phonemic awareness for a major group of people with dyslexia, you'd be missing a good program for them. Same is true with ADHD. I'm actually doing a webinar later this week on 5 breakthroughs in brain training research. This is one of those breakthroughs, and that is, you can see here, about 30% of the clients we see have ADHD, and this is a huge database here. This is over 5,400 clients diagnosed with ADHD. Interestingly enough, broad attention is the 4th weakest skill. There are actually 3 skills weaker than their attention score. So, if you take just trying to develop attention skills for someone with ADHD, you're probably missing a full plan. And so by testing all these areas, it gives you, again, a much better look at where you want to work. Here's people on the spectrum, 857 clients. Again, a cluster of weak cognitive skills. And here's brain injury. This is a new group that we work with. But it really allows, this test really allows us to focus in the areas that we want to focus. Okay, so that's the Gibson test. If you have any questions, by the way, just feel free to put them in the chat or the question box, and I'll ask them at the end. So let's go ahead and look at the Gibson test. So just some features of this Gibson test. This is the largest normative database of adults and children of any major cognitive assessment. So you can see our base there. This test also is very unique in that it measures auditory processing, which is a major skill needed for sound-based languages, as well as word attack. It has very strong psychometric properties. And then it is in over 20 different languages, and not only can the test taker take the test in their own language, but if you're giving a report to a parent, it will also come in their language. And this test can be done either in person with an interactive version or digital testing, which would allow a professional to test large groups of people, as well as test someone who's maybe homebound. Or if, I think if you do sort of online services already, we're just starting to measure results of online training where, you connect with them over Skype or Zoom or something like that and do training with them. So this gives you the ability to test somebody who's not local to you. This test was also peer-reviewed recently. And you can see that full article link at gibsonresearchinstitute.org. And here's just a graph to show how this test would compare with other online tests. You can see the ANOM is the largest norming sample. I believe that's a military test, but it doesn't work with kids. So it's 17 to 65. So, and you also see we're the only test that does auditory processing and specifically phonemic awareness testing. So it's a really great tool for you to use. Okay, so let's look at the different tests. The first test is a memory test. We do both long-term memory as well as working memory skills. And on long-term memory, we'll have them hear information throughout the test. And then at the end, the long-term memory test is going to go through things that they did in the test. So a really great test. Working memory test, I actually had a memory champion recently take this test, and he was fascinated by it. He said it was a very unique, creative test, and he loved it. So if you're able to try it, I think you'll really like the working memory test. It's difficult, but that's working memory. Visual processing. This skill, of course, is very important for STEM subjects, as well as sports play, dance routines, maps, graphs. And this is not about how well you see, but how you process what you see. So that test is included. Logic and reasoning, which is a little bit of a higher thinking skill than the visual processing piece. How well does someone form concepts, solve problems? If you were going to give one IQ test, it would probably look something similar to this. IQ is course, or logic and reasoning is very important for different subjects like math or word problems, which is maybe one of the #1 concerns of parents besides reading and attention would be those word problems. Processing speed, and this will look at both clusters of numbers, letters, and designs. Auditory processing, I mentioned this is the #1 skill needed for reading and spelling according to the National Reading Panel. If you have poor auditory processing skills, then learning a foreign language is going to be very difficult, especially, of course, if it's a sound-based language. Oral instruction in school or comprehension. And then if you have poor auditory skills, the likelihood is that's going to affect your spelling and ultimately your writing, which would be really important. And just an example of what an auditory test would look like, you can see on the side, and we'll use nonsense words for this test so that if you do speak a different language and you hear the word, prelf, say prelf without the f sound, then they would analyze that nonsense words and say prel. So it's nonsense words, so it's not specific to any language. And then, of course, a word attack test. This is an English word attack test because we use an English reading program. So the good thing about this is if you're not interested in this area as the tester, you can turn this test off or you can take it off of your report if you want to test it, but maybe not focus on word attack. And it's also, this test, of course, is not part of our IQ test. So this report also comes with some unique features. It comes with an attention cluster and then a composite IQ score based on multiple tests, including the memory test and logic test, etc. So once the tester has their results, you do have this administrative website that you can go to. This will hold all the data for anyone that you've tested, and it will give you the raw scores, age equivalent if they're under 16, I believe, percentiles, and then standard scores. So if you are a researcher and are interested in using this type of test for your research, you do have all this information. We also want to know about you. In fact, if you're a researcher, you can apply to get this test for free based on the different type of research that you're doing. And this is when you're trying to print off the report, you get to decide what's going to be on that report. These are instant reports. And so let me show you. And this is sort of a beautiful report for professionals from what I hear. It saves a lot of work for you. So you can, test a lot more people, people that don't even speak English well, if that's your native language. And then you click a button and it comes up with this report. So it starts out with an overview, introduction, our philosophy on IQ, as well as how to look at these different test results. You have a place where you would put in the primary reason for the assessment, as well as there's a sheet that the parent would go ahead and put in their chief concerns or the chief complaints that they had. And then, as I mentioned, they're going to do these 64 questions, and this can be done while the client is taking the test or before and after. It's sort of like a little separate survey that they take. And then these are the types of questions that they would answer. And that leads to this chart where you can, and it just shows, it's a color-coded chart. So red, would show a significant concern, where green would show a minimal concern. The next graph is this, the actual skills tested, and this will give an age equivalent, again, if they're over 16, and then a standard score as well as their percentile rank. It gives you this graph, and the nice thing as well is these are not numbered graphs, pages. So if you really just want to show one graph, you have that option. They wouldn't see that there's a page missing on the report. But this will look at age equivalent, the percentile, and then of course a standard score. So if any of you have questions on a standard score, let me know, and you can sort of see the difference here. On the bottom here, you see standard score. So an average standard score here would be 100, and then the percentile rank that would match that would be 50. So you can sort of see the spread on the bottom. Standard scores are very important for research, where percentiles might make more sense for who you're talking to. And so a percentile would be, if I test 100 people that are the same age, where would that person rank? So if you're at the 61st percentile on the test, that means that 39 people the same age tested above you, and then 60 people tested below you on that test. You also have this dot graph to look at percentile scores. For us, the average, an average percentile score would be anywhere between the 40th percentile and the 60th percentile. And then this is an interesting graph. Some people like it. Some people aren't sure about it, but this is, it really just shows someone's potential, cognitive potential, and then how they score on the graph. So the blue area is how they scored, and then the white area or clear area is where there's potential for improvement. And of course, that's going to correlate with the other graph that you have. So you can see if these are their test results, percentile rank, etc., then this is what their radar graph is going to look like. So this is a pre and post test result. So if you enter pre-test results and then you go back, you have some type of intervention that you want to do, see how that impacted cognitive tests, then you can come back, put in a second report, and now you're going to have a capability on that admin to print off a final report. And this is a graph from a final report, so it looks at what changes occurred due to whatever intervention had happened. That also shows up on the radar graph, so you can see sort of the little gray area is pre. The purple area is their post, so their potential was very little when they started. It grew to a lot more, and then you can still see where they could use some additional training. You can also do multiple tests on here. So if you wanted to pre-test, post-test somebody after an intervention, and then a year later test them and see retention on that intervention, you have that ability to do as well. So this test can be given multiple times. We recommend not giving it more than within a 3-month period, pre and post test. And then this just shows you a different language. So I believe this is Arabic. And so depending upon the test that you choose, the graphs, all the reports change for you. So if you want some more information on the technical manual, that is available at gibsontest.com. And you can just click on the technical manual. You can download it so that you have access to it. As I mentioned, this test is completely available for research. You can just apply, and we are ready to donate this test to help researchers. So the test for professionals is available at wholesale pricing. If you went to gibsontest.com, you can apply to be a wholesale tester. And what that means is instead of the $97 per test that's listed on the website, if you purchase 10 tests, they're $10 each. If you purchase 100 tests to 499 tests, they're only $6 each. And then 500 plus, they're only $4 each. So, if you are a school administrator, you want to test your whole school, this is a great way to test large groups of people, and then you can almost use this as a screening tool to hone in and say, these people need additional testing. So hopefully it's a big time saver, a money saver, as well as an extra benefit that you can give to parents with the Gibson. So let me go ahead and answer any questions that we have here. And hopefully everybody could see the slides this time. So someone talk a little bit about the other languages. Yeah, so because we have all these licensees around the world, we're in over 47 countries now. What we did is we created the language based on if we have a licensee. So if a new licensee comes into, last year we had someone start in Thailand, and so we had the test translated with a translation company. Then we gave that translation to our licensee, who is a medical doctor, and then they translated it back into English for back translation, and that's sort of the process that we used for all the different tests. And I can't read Thai, our people can't read Thai, so it was very much an interactive translation process for all the tests. Did you use a different normative sample for each language? No, the test is based on English, and that is something that we will do in the future. But they are using the test right now around the world, and we do have access to those results. So probably once a year we'll go back in, look at the test results, and then as we have clients internationally that have schools, so I know that we did this in Guatemala, where we have maybe a whole school or several schools that can help us norm the test. Then we go back in and we renorm it and see how that affects the test. And we did find things right at the beginning with different groups. So you have to have, of course, all the different groups of people to norm a test. And so we did work through some of those things right from the beginning, especially the Spanish-speaking community. So that I do believe it's, they were part of the norming process, if that's helpful. And the age range of the sample, I believe, is 4-year-olds to 85-year-olds. So that's a great question. Register. Okay, and I will go ahead and put in a follow-up the webinar that we're doing this Thursday, 5 Breakthroughs in Brain Training Research, where we're going to go more into different things that we found in our research institute. I do not have, I cannot give you the slides to this, but I can give you a recording. And then if there are some specific slides or research, I'm happy to send you the peer-reviewed research. If you go to gibsonresearch.org, for instance, the ADHD research that I mentioned, if that's something you're interested in, the peer-reviewed presentations, the posters, the slides are available right on that site. What was the other? And I'll give you a link, so everyone that's attended today will receive a link to this test. I think you can do 2 tests with the link. So you could take it, you can give it to somebody else, and then once you purchase, a wholesale purchase of 10 or more tests, then you'll have an administrative site where you can purchase additional tests when you want to. And again, if you are considering this test for research, you can apply to get these tests for free if you have published research. So, and good to see that you're from different countries. So I've been to Panama before, and I can't remember if we're licensed in Panama. I know we're in Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Ecuador. We've been in El Salvador. I don't know if we're currently in those countries, but good to hear from you. And as I mentioned, portions of the test, we did get some norming help from Guatemala. So hopefully that helps. Well, thank you so much for attending. We will send you out this recording along with a link to the test and registration if you want to be registered for a Thursday webinar. And then again, the two websites that probably are going to be the most helpful to you are gibsontest.com. You can email us at sales@learningrx.com if you have a specific question regarding the test. And then the gibsonresearch.org, or yes, the gibsonresearch.org will have a lot of the different slides that I have. I will send you, we just finished a new research results and client outcomes report, which does have the peer-reviewed research on the Gibson along with the type of training that we do, and some of the research that that I sent you. This is brand new this week, so it's our third edition of it, and I'll give you a link to that as well, so that you can download that for your research. So thank you so much. You can see it's bright and sunny here in Colorado. I wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon, or maybe get some orders. So thank you so much.